Looking back through the history of the world's great civilizations, one cannot ignore the culture of Egypt, with its vast golden deserts, majestic pyramids, and mysterious tombs that have left a deep impression on the majority of people whenever Egypt is mentioned. Of course, there is much hidden beneath the sands of this civilization. Welcome to Dreamy Nights. Ancient Egyptian civilization originated from the Nile Delta, a vast river flowing across northeastern Africa, forming a triangular delta that provided the lifeblood for the entire Egyptian land. From this fertile yet isolated region in the middle of the desert, the Egyptians began farming, cultivating rice and developing agriculture, thanks to the silt and the black soil around the Nile. Unlike many later cultures, the Egyptians greatly valued the color black as the foundation of life. In contrast, the surrounding redlands or the endless Sahara Desert were filled with strange sandstorms, so the Egyptians associated the color red with misfortune. Every year, from June to September, the Nile flooded, bringing silt that allowed the Egyptians to grow crops such as barley, wheat, dates, lotus, and papyrus. The Nile Delta was also home to a diverse range of creatures important to Egyptian beliefs, including falcons, cattle, crocodiles, tigers, leopards, and many others. As a result, Egyptians developed a culture that deeply respected and worshipped animals, especially those like cattle and falcons. Being a land highly dependent on agriculture, most Egyptians were farmers, with some working as craftsmen and a small number as slaves. At a higher social level, there were kings known as pharaohs, meaning great house along with priests and nobles. Throughout the year, Egyptians farmed and raised livestock, living in mud brick houses, wearing light linen clothing, and enjoying meals that included bread, beer, vegetables, and fruits. The Egyptians practiced strict burial customs, making funerary rituals one of their most developed traditions. In ancient times, scenes of daily life and production were recorded on walls, temples, and tombs. Paintings also served religious and political purposes for the Egyptians. Art was a highly significant cultural element in their lives, and over thousands of years, they developed a strict and distinct artistic code that helped them maintain their identity and avoid foreign cultural influences or complete assimilation. Unlike Chinese or Greek paintings, Egyptian art emphasized simple lines and forms with ordered and balanced compositions. Egyptian writing and paintings were often inscribed on tombs, walls, temples, coffins, and even statues. In construction, stone was the most frequently used material for building and carving, although the Egyptians also valued wood in making coffins. To create vibrant paintings, they used iron ore, copper ore, and limestone. Besides paintings, they also crafted small statues and books of the dead, which they believed would protect them in the afterlife. Over time, the Egyptians inevitably absorbed influences from other civilizations, especially after invasions by foreign peoples. The Egyptians began to be influenced by both American culture and Greek culture during the Ptolemaic period. A more unique case is the culture during the reign of Akhenaten, where the Amarna art style emerged, depicting the real appearance of the king, unlike traditional paintings that exaggerated the achievements and appearance of the pharaohs. Amarna art also included scenes of daily life inside temples, rather than just tombs as before. Egyptian writing emerged in the 4th millennium BCE as one of the world's earliest scripts. According to mythology, it was the god Thoth who taught writing to the Egyptians. Hieroglyphs were the most common script at first, but contrary to popular belief, the Egyptians did not use only hieroglyphs. They also developed phonetic and ideographic scripts, though hieroglyphs remained widely used alongside phonetic writing. After the fall of ancient Egypt under Roman rule, it was not until 1799 that British Dr. Thomas Young began deciphering the Egyptian script, and by 1822, the French had finally discovered a complete way to read ancient Egyptian writing. This breakthrough transformed the study of ancient Egypt after centuries of obscurity. Among the ancient writings, religious texts were the most important, carved into pyramid corridors to record rituals and methods for ensuring prosperity in the afterlife. Beyond art, it was perhaps science that was the greatest achievement of Nile civilization. Egyptians were the first to create a calendar and knew the value of pi along with other basic mathematics. They also developed a rich literary tradition alongside medicine and commerce, and they even built the largest lighthouse of the time, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. This lighthouse used the most advanced technology of its era to guide ships, but unfortunately later wars destroyed it. In Egypt, pharaohs were not only rulers but also guardians and divine incarnations with supreme authority. Like many later polytheistic religions, Egyptians believed that gods were not always benevolent and had to be worshipped and prayed to. The realms of the gods were sealed off from the outside world, and only priests could communicate with them in the temples. The Egyptian religion was ancient and complex, consisting of many overlapping local deities. Among these were 3 major pantheons: the sun god Ra, Horus, and Osiris. The sun was seen as a source of fire and life, so Ra held the highest position and was considered the ancestor of the entire pantheon. Osiris, on the other hand, was associated with the underworld and was worshipped as such, though Egyptian mythology did not clearly state his origins. Over time, Osiris's cult merged with those of Horus and Ra, creating a significant long-term influence. The rivalry between the priests of Ra and the priests of Osiris can be seen as a major religious conflict that lasted for centuries. Since Ra was originally a Western Asiatic god, the local Egyptians gradually sided with Osiris, eventually causing Osiris to overshadow Ra. Initially, Horus was simply an ancient sky god representing kingship, with one eye symbolizing the sun and the other the moon. In the early days, there was the great Horus, the son of the earth god Geb and the sky goddess Nut. He married the hippopotamus goddess Ratoit and gave birth to their son, Horus the Younger, also known as Harpus or Harpocrates, who represented the rays of the morning sun. Through the process of syncretism with other deities, Horus came to represent the falcon-headed gods and was also associated with the sun god Ra, eventually merging with Ra to become Re-Horakti. Both Ra and Horus were revered as the great sun that brings life. While Ra was considered the king of the gods and the supreme sun, Horus was regarded as the god of war and the leader of armies. The images of great Horus and Horus the Younger also changed over time. In the most famous story, great Horus was the brother of Osiris, Set, and Isis. When Set rebelled and killed his brother, the son of Osiris and Isis, Horus the Younger, rose up and killed Set in revenge. Another lesser-known version tells of Ra giving birth to the twin brothers Osiris and Horus, and when Set rebelled and killed Osiris, Horus avenged his brother. Notably, Egyptian mythology emphasizes cycles of death and rebirth, which has led some scholars to argue that Horus the Younger is the reborn Great Horus. Besides the prominent trio of Ra, Osiris, and Horus, many other important gods in Egyptian culture include Set, one of the most famous figures in mythology, associated with cruelty and desert storms. His story involved seizing power from his brother Osiris and sister Isis, only to be overthrown by Horus, the god of war. However, Set's original form was not evil. He was remembered as a friend of the dead. Great Horus and Set fought and became the gods of the daytime and nighttime skies, respectively. Set was also an important deity in the cult of Ra, serving as the protector of the sun from chaos. Over millennia, especially during the invasion of Egypt by the Hyksos, Set gradually became regarded as a chaotic and evil god, since the Hyksos also worshipped Set. Interestingly, unlike other gods whose heads were based on real animals, Set's head was based on a completely imaginary creature, and no one knows why the Egyptians conceived of this. Set came to be known as an outsider, representing the desert in opposition to civilization. Isis, the goddess of magic, healing, and motherhood, played a crucial role in helping Horus avenge Osiris's death and ascend the throne. In another famous story, Isis tricked Ra into revealing his true name by poisoning him, forcing him to hand over his power to Osiris, earning her the title of She Who Knows All Names. Anubis, the jackal-headed god who guided the dead, was sometimes considered the son of Set, but some tales suggested that Osiris had fathered him with Set's wife. Older versions even described Anubis as the son of Ra. Thoth was a god born alongside Ra, representing intellect and wisdom, and often depicted as the moon god, embodying the wisdom of the sun god Ra. The most important role of Ford was recording the judgments about the fate of the dead. Thoth later was also mentioned as the founder of Ra, astronomy, mathematics, language, and the arts of reading and writing. The Ogdoad were 8 primordial gods worshipped at Hermopolis, forming a divine system with 4 gods representing basic concepts and 4 gods representing their opposites, similar to the yin-yang concept of Chinese civilization. The Ogdoad consisted of He and Hehet, time and space, Nun and Naunet, order and chaos, Kek and Keket, light and darkness, and Amun and Amonet, creation and destruction. Amun was originally one of these 8 gods, but gradually overshadowed the others, along with deities like Ra, Osiris, and Seth. During the 12th dynasty, Amun became a prominent god, worshipped widely in Thebes. Unlike Osiris, who was portrayed as the son of Ra, Amun was identified with Ra himself, becoming Amun-Ra, a god venerated in major cities like Thebes and Memphis. A god with a ram's head representing the power of creation, he was believed to have created the gods and humans. The god Khnum was associated with both creation and the Nile, bringing life and peace to Egypt's inhabitants. Sekhmet, a lion-headed goddess, embodied the destructive heat of the sun and was later identified with Hathor, the cow-headed goddess of love. Bastet, the cat goddess, was believed by many researchers to originate from feline worship. She was also associated with the moon and was much gentler than Sekhmet. Bastet and Ra merged with Sekhmet to form Sekhmet Bastet Ra, a deity with a woman's body, a man's head, and 2 falcon heads with wings growing from the arms. Ptah, one of the main gods of Memphis, was remembered as the embodiment of dawn and worshipped since the 2nd dynasty. For the Egyptians, Ptah was not only the patron of crafts but also a creator god who made the boats that carried the dead to the underworld. Ptah also appeared as Ptah-Seeker, representing the primal force of chaos in the darkness of night. Sobek, the crocodile-headed god of the Nile, represented water and fertility and was a patron of the military, often accompanying Ra. Some sources recorded Sobek as the son of Set. Apophis, the embodiment of chaos, darkness, storms, and earthquakes, was often depicted as a serpent lurking in the underworld to attack Ra during his journey to bring sunlight. Apophis was explained by the Egyptians as the cause of eclipses, as they believed it was trying to devour Ra when the sun was hidden. In some versions, Apophis was also described as Ra's twin brother. Setne was a legendary prince inspired by Khemwaset, a historical figure and the son of Rameses the Great. It is said that Sene was a talented scribe and a wise and great prince. However, Sene and his wife Maitu Askit had no children. One night, Sene's wife prayed to both the gods and nature spirits, and eventually they had a child named Koksik Tsiosirik. The child grew rapidly and became a talented magician, even recognized as the wisest and most magnificent of magicians. Together with his father, he once journeyed to the underworld of Osiris, where he showed his father Ra that no matter how wealthy one might be in life, after death, the gods judge only the virtue of a person. Over time, it was revealed that he was a powerful magician reborn to protect Egypt from foreign forces. However, immediately after defeating the enemies, Kiakarus was forced to disappear in the sacred fire. The hearts of Sene and Maitu Aki were broken by the loss of their child, but fortunately they were eventually blessed with another child to continue the family line. Athon was initially the solar disk and later became an important deity during the reign of Athena 10. The image of Athon was worshipped in daily life, representing both the sun and light, as well as being seen as the source of life itself. During the reign of the Greek origin pharaoh Ptolemy Thex, the Egyptian people shifted to a new religious form. The rulers of Egypt at the time were of Greek origin and saw the Egyptian gods as sharing a Greek hue, but expressed from a different perspective. Thus, gods like Amun were assimilated with Zeus, Hathor with Aphrodite, Osiris with Pluto, Set with Typhon, Bastet with Artemis, Thoth with Hephaestus, and Horus with Apollo. One particularly notable deity during this period was Serapis, a fusion of Osiris and Apis, two original Egyptian gods. Like Amun, Serapis was initially a minor local deity, but was fully elevated under Ptolemy the Fern to become a powerful god, merging Hades, Pluto, Dionysus, and Oxyc. Serapis was remembered as a god representing prosperity and ruler of the underworld. Alongside Serapis, there was also Zeus Ammon, a fusion of Zeus and Amun, depicted with Zeus's face but adorned with two horns on either side of his head, symbolizing power. Another god, Horus, was known as Harpocrates, remembered as a divine child sitting on a lotus flower. The image of Harpocrates with his mother, the goddess Reset, was considered to have influenced the image of Jesus with the Virgin Mary. Pyramids and religious structures are also crucial. It would be a real omission to speak of Egypt without mentioning the pyramids, as they are Egypt's most important architectural works and the pride of its ancient people. Initially, Egyptians did not intend to build pyramids in a triangular shape. After consolidating power and centralizing the government, pyramids were first constructed under Djoser, the founding pharaoh of the Third Dynasty. Djoser's pyramid was a step pyramid composed of 7 distinct layers. Later pharaohs of the Third Dynasty continued building pyramids and tombs, but it was not until the reign of the first pharaoh of the Fourth Dynasty, Sneferu, that pyramid construction reached an entirely new phase. Instead of building step pyramids, Sneferu wanted a pyramid with smooth sides. After several failed attempts, he finally constructed the Red Pyramid at Dashur. Later descendants of Sneferu, such as Khufu and others, continued building smooth-sided pyramids made of white limestone and even topped with gold. From there, the famous Giza Pyramid Complex was born. The pyramids were built with incredibly high technical skill at the time. Even though the Egyptians did not know about binding agents, they managed to fit huge stone blocks tightly together without using plaster or other adhesives. One of the reasons the pyramids have survived for so long is that, unlike square construction, scholars believe the pyramid's apex angle was around 52 degrees. Why 52 degrees? Because when a gust of wind blows dust, it naturally forms a pile at an angle of 52 degrees, also known as the angle of repose in nature. This is often considered one of the reasons why pyramids have endured for such a long time. Another important factor was the narrow angle of the pyramid, which made it easier to stack the stones horizontally. Of course, we must also recognize the fact that ancient Egypt's government was very effective at managing the population, mobilizing thousands of workers to transport, carve, and build stones, while receiving contributions from architects and intellectuals. Unfortunately, very few ancient documents survive that describe the methods used to build the first pyramids, which were built during the Third Dynasty under the reign of Imhotep, a famous vizier. Over time, more pyramids were built, among which the Pyramid of Khufu stands out as one of the grandest pyramids ever constructed. It took 35 years to build and initially stood at 146 meters high, but erosion reduced it to 138 meters. The ancient Egyptians believed that after death, a person still had to work, so building a pyramid was a way for a pharaoh to escape hardship after being reborn. Therefore, pyramids were not only tombs for pharaohs to rest in, but also stairways to help the pharaoh ascend to the sky. Inside the pyramid, many spells were carved onto coffins and other objects for the pharaoh's use, along with prayers and offerings. The architectural structures of the pyramids in particular, and Egyptian architecture in general, were used for both spiritual and commemorative purposes, as well as to serve political aims by showcasing the power of the pharaohs. Over time, the pyramids gradually declined and were replaced by rock-cut tombs. One of the main reasons why the Egyptians abandoned pyramids was that they were easily looted during times of unrest. However, even when pharaohs shifted to building tombs in safer places, the risk of looting remained high. By the 10th century, Western archaeologists were fortunate to find a few intact tombs, the most notable of which was Tutankhamun's tomb, discovered in the early 1920s. This led to rumors that the tombs of Egyptian pharaohs were cursed, as many people involved died under mysterious circumstances. In Howard Carter's initial expedition, several people such as Lord Carnarvon, a British nobleman who funded the expedition, George J. Gould, an American financier, and Arthur Callender, Carter's colleague and archaeologist, all died under unclear circumstances. Sir Brush Ingram was a friend of Carter and also received a gift made from a mummified hand with an inscription that cursed anyone who dared to disturb his body, saying that person would suffer torment from fire, water, and disease. After this event, Ingram's house was burned down and, after being rebuilt, was swept away by a flood. 16 years after discovering the tomb, Carter also died, and many people speculated that he too had been cursed like the others. Of course, many explanations have been offered as to why the archaeologists died, and even today the most reasonable explanation remains that they died from the toxic spores of the fungus Aspergillus flavus. However, this is still a controversial topic with no definitive answer. There have also been similar cases involving other tombs, though they were not widely known. After the tomb of Pharaoh Seti was discovered in 1817, Giovanni Battista Belzoni, the Italian explorer who discovered the tomb, suddenly died in 1823, only 6 years after the discovery. He called himself the Great Belzoni when entering the tomb, and not only caused serious damage to the reliefs, but also devastated the overall structure of the tomb. Unlike Carter, we know that Belzoni suffered from dysentery while traveling in West Africa. Besides the pyramids, the Sphinx is also a symbol of ancient Egypt. In fact, the Egyptian Sphinx never had the name Spring as we call it today. This name actually comes from the Sphinx of Greek mythology, and the two have no connection. To this day, no one knows why the Sphinx was created or what it symbolized. Many people still debate why the Sphinx was built and why it has no nose. Some stories claim that during his Egyptian campaign, Napoleon Bonaparte fired a cannon at the Sphinx's nose. But that is not true, because we know that the Sphinx had lost its nose centuries earlier. In Egyptian neighborhoods, most people lived in mud brick houses, while the upper classes lived in larger, more complex homes with intricate architecture. The walls were decorated with paintings and carvings of humans, animals, and gods. Unlike Western civilization, which believed the body had only two parts, mind and body or spirit and body, Egyptian civilization imagined the body had many different parts of the soul, along with one physical body. The body was seen as the dwelling place for the soul, so it needed to be preserved after death to remain intact. The soul included parts like the Ba, personality, Ka, life force, and Kaibit, shadow. While the brain is often considered the center of thought and emotion, the ancient Egyptians believed it resided in the heart, which they considered the seat of the soul. Therefore, they believed that after death, the heart would be weighed against a feather, representing justice to see if a person was worthy of entering the afterlife called Duat. If they were not worthy, the goddess Ammit would devour their soul. Influenced by these spiritual beliefs, the Egyptians developed an elaborate mummification system to prepare the dead for the afterlife. They would first dry the body with salt and other desiccants for several weeks. Afterward, the embalmers would remove all of Ra's internal organs, except for the brain. The organs were placed in 4 jars known as canopic jars, while the brain was discarded. After washing the body with fragrant water, they applied herbs for disinfection and sewed it up. The body was then wrapped in a cloth and placed in a coffin, with a mask made of either copper or gold. On the coffin lid, an image of the deceased was carved so that the soul could find its body easily in the afterlife. Finally, the mummy would be buried in different ways depending on the social status of the deceased. Individuals from the lower classes were simply mummified and placed in a makeshift tomb or on the outskirts of a larger tomb. Those from higher classes were carefully buried in decorated tombs, although often not in stone coffins. The highest-ranking individuals, such as pharaohs, royalty, and priests, were buried in elaborate, multi-layered coffins and stone sarcophagi, often with meticulous craftsmanship. Perhaps the most important burial ritual was the opening of the mouth ceremony, where a priest touched the mouth of the mummy or the coffin with sacred objects like an axe or a hook, symbolically opening the mouth so that the deceased could breathe and speak in the afterlife. Regarding the history of Egypt, it was initially formed from small communities along the Nile River, which provided fertile alluvial soil and abundant water that supported the development of crafts and agriculture. These conditions laid the foundation for the emergence of larger kingdoms, passing through three major periods: the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom, along with two regions, Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. The names of these two regions were based on the flow of the Nile from south to north. Initially, both Upper and Lower Egypt were separate regions, but they were gradually unified under Pharaoh Narmer, creating the first dynasty of Egypt. Mani the Kam. Capital of Egypt was Memphis, which connected the upper and lower regions. After the end of the first and second dynasties, Egypt officially entered the Old Kingdom period, marked by Egypt's strength and unity and the construction of iconic structures such as the pyramids of Giza and the Sphinx, symbols of the grandeur of ancient Egyptian civilization. Therefore, this time is also remembered as the Golden Age of the Pyramids. However, as the central government weakened, Egypt fell into instability, a period known by historians as the First Intermediate Period. In the Middle Kingdom, the pharaohs focused on building temples, public works, and expanding their influence. However, this was also a time when Egypt faced many attacks from foreign peoples, threatening its autonomy. Compared to other periods of Egypt, the Middle Kingdom was less prominent, especially when compared to the grandeur of the Old Kingdom with its pyramids or the later brilliance of the New Kingdom. Nonetheless, an important mark of this period was cultural development, with many books such as the coffin texts, the predecessors of the Book of the Dead, which appeared in this time, as well as beautifully and intricately designed coffins. The pharaohs of this period also left significant legacies, such as expanding territory into Nubia. However, as the central government weakened, they had to limit resources for pyramid construction. Therefore, the pyramids of this period were built smaller and more conveniently to save costs. In the end, what ultimately brought down Egypt during the Middle Kingdom was not primarily central authority, but rather natural disasters, such as floods and plagues. Egypt then entered the Second Intermediate Period and endured a period of foreign rule by the Hyksos people for a time. After a long and fierce war during the 17th dynasty, the Egyptians finally regained autonomy in the 18th dynasty, officially beginning the New Kingdom period. The New Kingdom, which followed the Middle Kingdom, is often considered the peak of Egyptian civilization, a golden age of economy, politics, and culture. Instead of building pyramids, the pharaohs chose to construct tombs in a large royal necropolis called the Valley of the Kings. Many artistic, architectural, and military achievements were recorded during this time. Although the early pharaohs of the New Kingdom continuously expanded their territory through conquest, it was a new queen who consolidated and stabilized the empire that her ancestors had built. She re-established the economy, trade, and diplomatic relations with neighboring powers while strengthening her own legitimacy. Through religious activities and the construction of temples, she ruled strictly for 21 years, and after her death in 1458 BCE, her nephew Thutmose succeeded her and spent his reign expanding territory and consolidating the lands his ancestors had reclaimed. During this period, Egypt also had other notable pharaohs, the most prominent of whom was Amenhotep IV, known in history as Akhenaten. He was the second son of the aging pharaoh Amenhotep III and was never expected to inherit the throne. But after his brother's death, he ascended and initiated a religious reform, abolishing Egypt's traditional polytheistic religion. Egypt transitioned to worshipping Aten, the sun disk. Amenhotep IV even changed his name to Akhenaten, and with this religious reform, the empire that his ancestors had built gradually fell into instability and decline. After Akhenaten's death, most of his reforms were reversed, and with the death of the last pharaoh of the dynasty, Horemheb, the illustrious 18th dynasty came to an end. After Horemheb's death, power shifted to Ramesses I, one of the king's high officials. He founded the 19th dynasty and worked hard to consolidate his authority and stabilize Egypt. However, Ramesses I died after just 2 years of rule, leaving his legacy to Seti I, who led campaigns to conquer the Levant. Egypt reached its height under the third king of the 19th dynasty, Ramesses II, also known as Ramesses the Great. During his 75-year reign, Egypt flourished culturally and economically, expanding its territory into the Levant, now known as the Near East. To Egyptians at the time, Ramesses II restored the lost glories from Akhenaten's reign. After the rule of Ramesses II, the 19th dynasty gradually weakened, paving the way for a new dynasty. The 20th dynasty of Egypt began with great promise, especially with the long and successful reign of its third ruler. However, during this period, Egypt gradually weakened and fell under the control of foreign powers. With the collapse of the Bronze Age, Egypt transitioned from a thriving empire to an isolated region. The collapse of the 21st dynasty marked the end of Egypt's autonomy, and the land became part of the Achaemenid Empire of Persia. After the Persians successfully conquered Egypt, Alexander the Great, a brilliant conqueror from northern Greece, eventually drove the Persians out and took control of the region. Following Alexander's death, his general Ptolemy seized control of Egypt and established the Ptolemaic dynasty. The most significant event during this period was the fall of the Ptolemaic dynasty under Cleopatra VII. After the Battle of Actium, Egypt ultimately became a province of the Roman Empire and continued to be ruled by the Eastern Roman Empire after 395. In the early Middle Ages, Islam began to develop and spread into Egypt, leading the country to gradually shift from traditional religions to Islam and separating it from the Eastern Roman Empire. The city of Cairo flourished, becoming a major economic and cultural center. Subsequent periods saw Egypt fall under the influence and rule of the Ottoman Empire, as well as French and British colonial powers. In 1952, Egypt achieved independence, ending the colonial era and ushering in a new chapter as a republic, opening up new opportunities and challenges for the future.